talk a little bit about posture. I mentioned yesterday, most important thing is to have a straight back, but you also want to be sort of aligned, so not kind of leaning forward. So one thing to check is if you were to drop a coin from your nose, would it hit your navel, your belly button? Yeah. And then in the Buddhist tradition, you often see left hand down first, right hand and the thumbs touching like this. So you can do like that. I see other of you with the hands on the knees like that. It's okay. But just make sure that there's a little bit of space between your elbow and your body. So don't be too like tight or, like a chicken or something. Yeah. And then the other thing, it is said to just kind of gently tuck your neck, sorry, your chin into your neck like this. You'll feel some elongation in the back there. So there is a kind of connection between the body and the mind, and there's energy channels that run through the body, and that sort of helps the alertness and clarity. And then different meditation teachers say different things about the eyes being open or closed. In general, if you have closed eyes, it's easier to concentrate, but it's also easier to fall asleep. So since we're only meditating for a few minutes, unless you have already a kind of multi-month practice with your eyes closed, try to just keep your eyes slightly open enough that some light can come in. Yeah. All right. And then the mouth closed. We'll be breathing through the nostrils, but try not to clench the teeth. So just have the mouth in a relaxed position. You can put your tongue on the roof of your mouth behind your teeth, on the palate. And then once in that posture, there's the Tibetans say, the body on the cushion and the mind in the body. So letting go of all the thoughts racing here and there. And generally, it's good to just connect with the body, getting a sense that we're now sitting as opposed to standing, walking, or lying down. We can also at the beginning sort of check for any pockets of tension we might be holding. So particularly in the facial muscles around the eyes, often we have a kind of subtle squinting. Just soften all the facial muscles. And then we continue as we did last night with the breath, just a natural breath as it is, not trying to have a long breath or a short breath, but rather just trying to be aware of the breath, the feelings, the sensations in the body as we breathe in and out. So wherever that is most vivid for you, the abdomen, the chest cavity, or the space around the nostrils. And as we try to do that, when other appearances come to the mind, try not to engage, but allow them to pass away on their own accord. So now let's take a moment to just adjust the motivation. So yesterday we talked about the fact that we all have this amazing potential, what we call Buddha nature, the potential to totally transform our minds, our lives. But in order to awaken that potential, we need the outer and inner conditions. The inner condition of having a sound body and mind, the outer conditions of meeting with the Dharma and having enough time to put the teachings into practice and learn about them. So I think that how amazingly fortunate it is that we have such a situation. We can think in the world how very few have such the opportunity as we do. And so given this chance, given this opportunity, please think that we're going to make best use of it to develop our minds, make progress along the path to actualizing our highest potential. And as we do so, we ourselves will be able to find lasting, authentic peace and happiness, and also be able to share and guide others to achieve the same thing. And therefore, we're going to participate in these lectures and the meditations and direct our energy for this goal for all sentient beings to fully awaken and achieve their highest potential free from all suffering. Okay. All right. Hmm. So when we were introducing ourselves yesterday, I heard a lot of people made me very happy, right? A lot of people have been studying Lamrim. We have our group that's reciting the whole Lamrim Chenmo. It's good. But I'm also aware that maybe some people, uh, they don't know about Lamrim, right? So we have different levels here. So, Romy, let's go to maybe slide 9. Okay, so yesterday we had our first Tibetan lesson. Do you remember what that was? Huh? Nangpa versus Chiropa. Okay, so this is the second one. Lam Rim. Okay, so Lam is path, Rim is stages. Okay, so Lam Rim is a genre of commentary on the Buddhist teachings that basically arrange the various teachings that the Buddha gave in order of practice. So I'm not sure how many of you have read the sutras, but the sutras are basically the sort of a record of uh, the teachings the Buddha gave sort of directly from his mouth. So a little bit about the Buddha's sort of life story. Mm, actually, maybe we don't need this slide now. Just a question. You know, sometimes when I'm doing a Zoom and I share, then the slide is up and I'm just a little in the corner. Is that what happens here? Hmm. Mm, right. Okay. So it's not because I have a big ego, but it's because I'm actually not talking about this yet. Okay, we'll get there. Yeah, terrific. Okay. Because anyway, it's going to be talking about this greatness of the authors and blah blah blah. Anyway, it's just so for some of you it'll be review, but in any case, so the Buddha, historical Buddha, was born into a um, royal family, and it is said that when he was born, so his father, the king, then approached some of the uh, astrologers, soothsayers. Yeah, you know that word. So astrologers, they're making prediction about his son, and they said, well, according to the charts or whatever they sort of were able to see, your son is going to be either a great king or a great religious leader. So the king thought, okay, well, you know, to sustain and have my kingdom abide and grow, uh, I want my son to take over the reins when I'm, you know, finished. And so thought, yeah, I don't want my son to become a religious leader. So his strategy was then to keep the young prince in the palace and sort of spoil him with luxury, thinking that, you know, if he is spoiled in that way, he won't have um, any inkling or motivation to leave the palace life behind and, you know, go meditate under trees or in caves, anything like this, right? So it is said that for the first, you know, several, mm, yeah, many years of the young prince's life, he didn't leave the palace at all. Of course, he had the training in the you know, education as well as the kind of arts of combat. He was trained in the Vedas, so forth, and excelled in all those topics. But in any case, at one point when the Buddha sort of became mm, maybe teenager, adolescent, snuck out of the palace for the first time. And when that happened, um, he had four sort of visions or sights for the first time. So he left the palace with his attendant, and they came across a sick person, right? And this is the first time uh, the young prince had seen such a thing. So he asked his attendant, what happened? What happened to this person? And the attendant said, oh, they're sick. Prince says, Prince Siddhartha says, oh, well, is it, is it the only one? You know? And the attendant says, no, actually, many people, almost everyone gets sick. Wow. Then they come across an old person, an elderly person. maybe, walking with a cane, hunched over, white hair, very wrinkly. What happened to this person? Oh, they're old. They're elderly. Wow. Does this happen? This is the only one? No, this happens to everyone. Mm. And then, sees a dead body, corpse. Same thing. Then it's explained. No, everyone dies. And the last sight was the young prince Siddhartha sees a renunciate. So the sannyasin, you know, and asks the attendant, "Oh, what is this? What is this guy doing? Wearing some robes, Well, and the attendant explains, so that person has left the worldly life behind to seek liberation from all of suffering. Ooh. So Prince Siddhartha goes back to his father, the king, and sort of explains everything he's seen and says, "Hey, I'm paraphrasing, but hey, Dad, you're the most powerful person in this whole kingdom. Can you do something? Can you stop sickness?" "No, son." "Can you stop the aging?" "No, son." "Can you stop death?" "No, son." Hmm? So, hmm, remember we were saying yesterday, enthused, the Nagarjuna stanza, enthused by great compassion, you taught the Holy Dharma to overcome all wrong views. So this is the enthused by great compassion, right? So already at that time, remember compassion being this wish that others be free from suffering, right? And then taking responsibility to do it oneself. So this thought of compassion was already sort of stirring in the young prince's mind, right? And seeing that, although, I mean, it is true that um, the type of government, and if you have a benevolent leader, it does help a lot for the well-being of the people in that land. But these kind of more fundamental sufferings of sickness, old age, and death, Buddha seeing that even if he became the king and followed in his father's footsteps, would not be able to sort of free his people from that. And so later, so the Buddha, uh, well, Siddhartha does get married, has a son, but then at one point leaves the past life. Okay? Now, don't worry, right? The Buddha wasn't being a deadbeat dad or anything. So his son and wife were being well taken care of in the palace. Okay. And his wife, it is said, was actually very supportive of the Buddha leaving. And actually later, even the son then, ordains and all this. In any case, the Buddha leaves the palace, leaves the worldly life behind, then practices with the sort of great renowned masters of that time, kind of masters their teachings, but realizes that, well, it wasn't enough. In yeah, without getting into it too much at this point. So some of you might have heard about these other concentrations, right? Form realm concentration, formless realm concentrations. Anyway, these refer to extremely concentrated states of mind where you can hold the object for basically as long as you want, um, hours and hours. At that point, the body is very light. They even say that some people, they don't need to eat regular food anymore, but they eat the so-called food of samadhi, samadhi being meditative concentration. In any case, when you have such a concentrated mind, entirely focused on one object, then the afflictive emotions, anger and jealousy, these things, it can't come up. They're sort of temporarily suppressed, right? And since that state of mind is very blissful, then many in the past, there's a risk, we can say, that one could mistake those concentrations with the attainment of nirvana. But when the Buddha arose from those concentrations, he saw, oh well, no, this can't be the actual nirvana, because if that were the case, the total passing beyond all of suffering, it would be stable and not dependent on entering into such a concentration. Make sense, right? So eventually, the Buddha then leaves the masters he'd been teaching. He'd been learning with, and then it goes to practice on his own. He at that point had 5 other spiritual companions. They were practicing. At one point, they were engaged in very austere practices, ascetic practices, whereby they weren't eating, or it is said they're eating 1 grain of rice a year. So maybe some of you have seen this statue of the Buddha in an emaciated form. Have you seen? Yeah. So this is very popular in Thailand, and also in Dharamsala, in the main kind of temple. There's a replica of such a statue. I think they found either in Pakistan or Afghanistan. Anyway, so it shows the Buddha, just skin and bones. So although this isn't the way to practice, it shows, the Buddha's willingness to undertake such things, motivated by that compassion and wanting to find the means to end all suffering. But after about 5 years of practicing in that way, at one point the Gautam was so weak that he faints, collapses. And it is said a cowgirl, Sujata, then comes across this very weak, emaciated meditator, and gives kheer. It's a kind of rice pudding. The Buddha eats this, feels rejuvenated, and then goes to the Bodhi tree in present-day Bodh Gaya in northern India. And he makes the kind of commitment that now that he has the energy, he's going to sort of sit in his meditation until he achieves the final goal. In any case, it is said that then over one sort of evening, meditating, and then at dawn, he achieves the state of enlightenment. So then it's also said that after he achieves enlightenment, he utters this one stanza. I didn't include it, so hold on, but I have it in another context. Mm. So upon achieving enlightenment, the Buddha says, profound, peaceful, elaboration free, clear light, and non composite. Such is the nectar like Dharma I have discovered. Finding no one who can fathom this teaching, in silence I'll retire into the woods. Okay. So it is said that, yeah, for the first, I think, 7 weeks after the Buddha was enlightened, to ordinary appearances, he didn't teach. Okay. So there's a lot of debate about this. Anyway, um, hmm. what we say, right, in our tradition is that, this was kind of a little bit of a show for us, right? The Buddha, he knew he was going to teach. His whole thing was to to find the way to perfect freedom so that he could lead others to do the same thing, right? But to give us a little bit of pause, right? And for us to kind of recognize that actually it's not easy. There's something quite profound and deep going on here. And so we have the kind of requisite humility to enter into the teachings, right? Then to appearances, remain silent. In any case, after that, um, his first teaching actually was he was training with those other five. And, they were all practicing in that way, not eating. And so it became kind of known that, Siddhartha, he ate the rice pudding, right? So they were disappointed in him and they're like wanting to ostracize, shun him, ignore him. So they had that as a plan. They see him coming. Oh, there's the wimp. But then when he approaches, they see a kind of, glow, something's different. And then, they all sit down and the Buddha gives his first teaching, the teaching on the Four Noble Truths, okay? Which is, one of the main topics of this weekend. And actually the kind of very, very heart of all the Buddhist teachings, right? Mm. So then for the rest of his life, what actually happened, and I brought this up because we were talking about the sutras, then the Buddha would travel around northern India, and people would ask him questions, and he would answer those questions. Okay, so, and one thing, remember we were saying the Buddha is the one who's completely abandoned all the obscurations, right? So all those obscurations, the mental obscurations, what do they actually obscure? But they obscure the totally purified mind, it is said, is omniscient, all knowing, knows all phenomena. And in the Mahayana tradition, and we'll talk about that in a second, but what that means is, and why that's extremely useful, is you can see each individual's sort of state of mind. You can see their karma. You can see their intelligence level, right? And therefore, you can then tailor your advice, your teaching, exactly to what they need at that time and at that moment. Okay? So now, right, when we look at the sutras, Someone asks the Buddha a question, the Buddha answers. Okay. Now, a few years later, someone else might, or even a few seconds later, someone else might ask that same question. And the Buddha then would give an entirely different answer, perhaps. Right? Mm. So now then, if we just look at the sutras, okay, there's two practical problems, actually three. The first is, I don't know if you have here, but there are 108 volumes of the sutras. Have you ever seen? Yeah. So who has time for that? 108 volumes. But even if you had, all right, or they're on Audible or something, you could get the audio book, right? When you commute, listen to the sutras, 2 times speed, whatever you want to do. Then still the question will come, wait a minute. In this sutra, with this question, the Buddha said one thing. In this other one, it said another thing, right? So there are some apparent contradictions. How do you resolve all that? And then the third practical problem is, okay, well, where to start? What do I actually do? There's 108 volumes. What do I do? Do I practice from volume 1 and then go to 108? Right? Because the kind of chronology of the people who met the Buddha and what they then asked, I'm actually not sure that even the 108 sutras are in chronological order. But even if it were, since it just was the person at that time had a question on their mind and asked, well, how does that then mean that everyone else has to follow the same order? Probably not, right? So then, Lam Rim, stages of the path to enlightenment, then is arranging the teachings that were given by the Buddha in the order of practice for us. Then, and when we say path, the Lamrim is actually Janchup Lamrim, right? So Janchup is like the enlightenment, right? So it's the stages of the path to enlightenment. Okay. Taking someone from where we are now, total beginner, right, all the way to enlightenment. So that's what Lamrim is. Okay. Romy, we can go back to the slide now. So now were many, we mentioned Lamrim is a genre of teaching, right? So it's a kind of, sorry, I'm used to teaching in India where there's a lot of, non-native English speakers. So sometimes when I use these words, I'm like, genre, do we know? Anyway, it's a class of teachings, right? Category. So there's famously the 18 great Lamrim commentaries, but I heard some people, they've been working with Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand, which was one Lamrim commentary written by Bhavanga Rinpoche. Actually, it was an oral teaching given that was later sort of transcribed and put to paper. Anyway, so, but all of the Lamrim teachings, they'll have these 4 outlines at the root. And so the greatness of the authors given to show the teaching has an immaculate source. Okay. So you see, okay. We have to understand one thing before we go on. Okay, so I mentioned the Buddha. Then he taught these sutras for the rest of his days on earth. He was enlightened at age 35. Took the aspect of passing away into nirvana when he was 80. Then after the Buddha passed away, then there are these generations of sort of other practitioners, gurus in the lineage. Okay. Then, just to give some history, in the I think 7th, 8th century, then the Buddhist teachings went to Tibet, and at that time, the great religious king, I think Chuzong Detsen, he sent 25 sort of the best and brightest to go to India and translate the Buddhist teachings. So already there have been over a century, maybe 1200 years of further commentaries being written by the Indian masters. And so all of the sutras, all of those commentaries, so the sutras, Kangyur in Tibetan, the commentaries written by other Indian masters, the Tengyur. Okay. Gyur means to translate. Okay. So anyway, at that point, all these other teachings were translated into Tibetan from the Sanskrit. And then they were brought to Tibet. But unfortunately, what happened was a few centuries later, there's a king, and he was a major supporter of the Dharma. And his brother, who was next in line for the throne, sort of had some, what can we say? Some advisors who sort of reminded him, hey, you're next in line. So if you kill your brother, you'll be king. But since your brother is such a supporter of the Dharma, to avoid repercussions, you should also wipe out the Sangha, all the monks. So his name was Lang Dharma. He did that, and he wiped out, killed so many of the monks, killed his brother, and only 2 monks remain. And it is said that they were able to flee central Tibet, and they went to China. And just giving some history for our friends in other parts of the world, right? So then, to have an ordination ceremony, right? You actually need a kind of, you can think of it as a quorum of at least 5 other monks. And so after Lang Dharma himself was killed, yeah, it's like Game of Thrones, right? Then, in order to sort of reestablish the Buddhism within central Tibet, the 2 Tibetans came, and they invited 3 Chinese monks who came to central Tibet, and they were able to have an ordination ceremony and sort of reestablish the Buddha Dharma there. Well, we should say reestablish the lineage of monks. But what had happened in their intervening time was a lot of wrong views came up, right? And since the monks were killed, the scholars were killed, then no one was able to sort of know precisely all the meaning of the teachings, and a lot of wrong views came up. So what they thought was to then invite a master again from India who could then sort of clarify the doubts that came up. And so they invited the great master Atisha Dipamkara, who at that time, was he trained at the great monastic university of Nalanda, but he was staying at another monastic university, Vikramadashila. And so, yeah. Hmm. I'm looking at the clock. Okay, we have a lot to cover, but this is a nice story, right? It's a nice story. It's actually, this one's very inspiring. But at one point, the king of Tibet was sort of captured and held on ransom. And the kind of local warlord wanted, as payment, the weight of the king in gold to release the king. So, gold. I mean, there's a lot of natural, minerals and whatnot in Tibet, but gold is fairly rare. And anyway, one's body weight in gold would be like what, 70, 80 kilos. It doesn't, come easy, right? So anyway, they were searching, trying to find, collecting, and then at one point, they had collected, it is said, as much gold minus the weight of one's head. So let's say he was, 75 kilos. They collected 70 kilos of gold. But it wasn't enough. The warlord was like, all right, where's my other 5 kilos? So at that point, actually what the king said, he's like, yeah. I think his name was Jiangchu. Or that was his nephew. Anyway, said, many times I've sacrificed my life for something lesser, fought, went to war. Now I have the opportunity to do something really special. So take this gold, don't collect the 5 extra kilos, but take these 70 that you have now, go to India and invite a teacher to come back and invite Atisha Deepankara to come back and reestablish the Buddha Dharma here. And so, yeah, he was executed. But his nephew, I think his nephew was John Chupa, then was able to go to India, invite Tisha. Tisha came back. And Atisha wrote this text, The Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment. Janchup, Lam Drun. So Lam, path, Drun is the lamp. And so here, when we have the greatness of the authors, then actually Lama Tsongkhapa, who later, formed or you can say founded the Gelugpa school. When Lama Tsongkhapa talks about the greatness of the author, he doesn't talk about himself, although it's at the beginning of the text he's writing. He cites Atisha as the author. So given to show the teaching has an immaculate source, the point there is, since there had been all these kind of degeneration in interpretation, and people sort of I think it means this, right? You'll see in the Lamrim Chenmo, which is the text written by Lama Tsongkhapa, Oh, so by the way, just so you know, so the text written by Atisha is about 6 pages, maybe 5, 6 pages only. Okay. Mm. The Lamrim Chenmo, 900 pages. Okay. Mm. So Chenmo means great. Okay. Chenmo. But Lam Tsongkhapa views his text as being a commentary on Atisha's text. And what you'll see when you read the Lamrim Chenmo is many, many, many times, almost every page, Lama Tsongkhapa is always citing, quoting Indian masters, right? So, Nagarjuna, Chandrakirti, and so forth. So this project, right, given to show the teaching has an immaculate source, part of the project that they had, both Atisha, later Lama Tsongkhapa, was to show that, hey, I'm not making this up. Look, these great Indian masters are saying the same thing, right? Mm. Anyway, then we have the greatness of the Dharma, right? Given to increase one's respect for the instruction, then how to teach and listen to the Dharma that has these two greatnesses, and then, only then, after going through those preliminaries, the actual teachings, right? The actual instructions. And then we're talking about the sequence, right? Rim, lam, rim. Got to do it in order, okay? Next slide. So then, when we talk about then these we're already saying after the Buddha, then there's many centuries of practitioner, and then Buddhism spread throughout Asia, and so then nowadays we can talk about the Theravada, the Mahayana, and so kind of historically, it's not just as simple, right? So I know, for example, in Sri Lanka, actually both the Theravada and the Mahayana spread, and then there'd be a king who favored one or the other, and then they would each kind of gain favor in that country. But now when we look today, generally in Sri Lanka, Southeast Asia, then it's the Theravadan schools, and they normally they use the Pali canon, the sutras that are in Pali language. And then the Mahayana, that's the one that spread in China, Korea, Tibet, so forth. And they follow the Sanskrit canon. Okay. But not only are these kind of historically, and they use a little bit different text, but within those texts, there's sort of different tenet systems presented, different philosophical viewpoints. And these philosophical viewpoints have a little bit, well, maybe a lot bit, a difference in philosophical sophistication. Okay. Remember how we were saying the Buddha with his omniscient mind is able to see the level of mind of the person asking the question, right? So next slide. These different tenet systems came up. The Buddha himself taught them, right? So again, Nagarjuna sort of gives this reasoning to explain, right? So just as a grammarian first has students read a model of the alphabet, so Buddha taught trainees the doctrines they could bear, means that they could understand. To some, he taught doctrines to turn them away from ill deeds, for some for the sake of achieving merit, some doctrines based on duality, to some doctrines based on non-duality, to some what is profound and frightening to the fearful, having an essence of emptiness and compassion, the means of achieving unsurpassed enlightenment. So, yeah. Remember how we were saying these two levels of truth, right? And the kind of first level of truth is our suffering and happiness are fundamentally the effects of actions that we ourselves do. Okay. All right. That's what we were saying is the conventional level of truth. So you see, mm, whereas the ultimate level of truth is getting into how we exist, right? Do things exist objectively, intrinsically? You know, do they exist independent from our mind perceiving them? Right? It's quite deep, difficult to understand. Hmm. So this is in part what the Buddha was talking about when he was silent for 7 weeks, right? What I've discovered, if I really explain, the depth of the teaching, no one's going to understand what I'm going to say. So better not to say, right? But all that complexity of the philosophical position, well, that first level of truth that just, do good, experience good in the future, do bad, experience suffering in the future. So do good and don't do bad, right? That is common across all the tenet systems, right? So teaching the doctrine they could bear, to some he taught doctrines to turn them away from ill deeds, and then also achieve merit means do good. And then to some, here we're getting on the philosophical doctrines based on duality, right? Duality. Yeah, we'll get into what this means, but yeah, duality. So, maybe it's okay to say this now. When we talk about phenomena, right? So they usually talk about two categories, right? There's the person, right? You, me, dogs, cats, raccoons, whatever, octopi. Yeah. And then there's phenomena other than a person. Okay. So we're interested in the person because we're people. We're the ones, it's the people who are experiencing suffering and happiness. Okay. All right. Then there's other phenomena. All right. So we are, what we can say, designated on the body and mind. Okay. Well, actually, let's investigate a little bit here. Let's not take this as a axiomatic, right? But we say my mind, my body. My mind is feeling very groggy today. I didn't have my morning coffee. my body is very tired today, right? So the grammar of that, we have, okay, my rosary, my cup. My rosary, my cup. We have the possessions and the possessor, right? Possessions, possessor. Yeah? So my body, my mind. We have possessions and possessor. We have, right? Okay. Now we're break time. No, not yet. Don't get up. 29 minutes. I have you. When we're on break time, I leave the Gompa. I'm going to get my morning coffee finally so that the next session can have a little bit more excitement. But then, oh, wait a minute. I forgot my cup. I forgot my mala here. Maybe I'll sort of set some malas. So then someone else comes in. Hey, whose mala is that? Oh, that's Namjong's mala, right? That's Namjong's cup. So we have the possessions being independent of the possessor, right? Okay. So how about my body, my mind? I can leave my body here. Oh no, maybe I'll leave my mind here and then my body will go down to make coffee. You know, leave my mind here in the Gompa. It's more peaceful. Can we find? Can we do that? Okay. So remember I said last night, the fundamental confusion on the ultimate level of truth is how things exist, how they exist, not if they exist. Okay. So you exist, I exist, cups, rosaries, we all exist. So one good way, I like to think about it like this. When we think of conventional truth, right, this kind of first level of truth, if you were to ask someone totally untrained in philosophy, in India, I say, your rickshaw driver. I mean, maybe they've studied philosophy. I'm just saying, anyone, and you ask them, do cups exist? Do rosaries exist? Of course, they'll say yes. Right? So when we now go into our inquiry into the ultimate nature of phenomena, okay, we don't harm the conventional nature. Okay, we're going to analyze how we exist, how other phenomena exist, but it's a how inquiry, not whether I exist or cups exist. Okay, keep that in mind. Because and this was this is the difficulty, right? And this is why the Buddha was reluctant to teach. Part of the profundity is, you know, if we are a little bit confused in what we're actually trying to analyze, okay, and we say, oh, wait a minute, possessor, possession, when I think of I have a mala and I have a cup and they're independent, but then when I think I have a mind, I have a body and they're not, you could maybe come up with a conclusion, therefore I don't exist. Maybe, right? If you can't point to that independent possessor, then you could say, oh, therefore I don't exist, right? In some of the sutras, right? You also see like in Heart Sutra, in emptiness, there's no eye, no ears, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, right? Oh, right? We can get confused. So this would be falling into nihilism, that nothing exists. And therefore, right, if you don't exist, well, the person that then experiences happiness or suffering due to the positive or negative actions that you do also doesn't exist, right? Then our sort of root impetus to abandon negative actions and do good ones is out the window. If we don't have a conception of ourselves as of the person that can withstand this level of philosophical inquiry, right? So for those who who can't, they get confused and they would say, oh, therefore I don't exist. And therefore, what I do doesn't matter. Then the Buddha didn't teach that level of truth and just said, hey, do good things, don't do bad things. Hmm? But then, then sort of guiding kind of step by step to, more subtle ways of viewing the world. And just to maybe, yeah, give you a little hint. So then, I'm going to say take the cup, right? So the cup is composed of all these little particles, right? You keep dividing, dividing, dividing. So in that time, there were these kind of partless atoms, right? The building blocks of all matter. So one tenet system held that, well, those fundamental building blocks, those are real. But everything else, like a cup, is just an amalgamation of that. But that's not real. Only these fundamental particles. Everything else, since it can be further subdivided. Why I was talking about this? We're on this stanza where we're talking about duality, non-duality. So a view based on duality would be that, hey, you exist. Oh no. Hey. Yeah, yes, you exist, but those those parts, the body and mind, that's kind of the real one. But you are just kind of like labeled onto that, right? Like imputed onto that, right? Then later, kind of more sophisticated philosophical schools will then say, you know what, actually, both you as the person and those parts that you're labeled on, they're equally uh, real or unreal, right? So that's what we were talking about. Another way to talk about duality is, there was one the mind only school, right? And so normally we think of, right, the object and then the mind perceiving the object as being separate, right? But for the mind only school, this kind of mirrors the notion of idealism in Western philosophy, but sort of there's kind of like in a dream, right? In a dream, we have a dream of a elephant, but there's no real elephant there. We have the appearance. So that dream elephant and the mind perceiving the dream elephant, the dreaming mind, they're not separate, right? So the mind only school holds that also. They say just like the dream world, our waking life is like that. There's actually no objects independent of the mind. Anyway. Okay. So therefore, next slide. So these four tenet systems of Buddhism, right? Why I brought that up might seem like a big tangent, but this is then to just know and classify these tenet systems. So the so-called Hinayana tenet systems, they believe in the self as a person, but not the self as a phenomenon. In other words, your body and mind, yes, those truly exist, but then you as the person, that kind of owner, yeah, we can't really find, right? But then the Mahayana tenet systems, oh yeah, you, yeah, can't really find, also your body can't really find, your mind can't really find. Okay. We'll just leave it at that for now. Okay. So because of that, then next slide. This Lamrim teaching, right? This is the second outline of the greatness of the teaching in order to generate respect for the instructions. So this Lamrim genre then allows us to recognize all the teachings as being non-contradictory, right? So when the Buddha, says one thing to one person and another to another, it's not because the Buddha was confused or he changed his mind or he's wishy-washy. He saw that, hey, uh, you can't handle the truth, right? You can't. If I tell you all the profundity about how phenomena exist, you'd fall into a nihilistic view. So I'm not going to tell you that right now. But later, I can tell you, or even to another disciple, I can tell you. Okay. So that's what we mean by non-contradictory. And then the Buddhas occur to you as instructions. So again, it's not just some philosophical abstraction, but these are things we need to put into practice. And then, through this Lamrim teaching, we can easily discover the victor's intentions. Victor means Buddha. So what did he intend when he taught these different teachings to different disciples? And then this last point, the greatness of a great misdeed stopping by itself. So what that means is, if we don't have this big picture in mind, we could then think, oh, the Buddha is just contradicting himself, and therefore I'm not going to engage with these teachings. I'm not going to study. And that would be a great misdeed. Or to even say that, hey, these other teachings that are kind of less philosophically sophisticated, I don't need to practice those. I don't need to learn about that. Just give me the highest, give me the best, right? And that also is a mistake. Because, well, remember, why are we doing all this? Eventually, we're going to be the ones teaching these disciples of different mind levels, right? Right? And so we also need to, know and learn about these different levels of sophistication. And also, by understanding the kind of lower philosophical views, that can then kind of clarify, and we can do a better job of contrasting the higher and lower views, and that will help us actually gain insight into the higher kind of tenet systems. Okay. So next slide. Remember, then after we have found a teaching with these two greatnesses, greatness of the author and greatness of the teaching, how do we then listen to the teachings? So there's listening with the 6 attitudes. Think of ourselves as a sick person, right? So yeah, we mentioned we're suffering, we want happiness, and we haven't been able to find yet the answer to our problems. So in that way, right? It's not judgmental. You're a bad person, but think of yourself as a sick person. You need help, right? You're not a bad person for getting a cold or whatever. But the instructor then is going to be the doctor. The doctor then kind of diagnoses you, prescribes medicine. I mean, can't do it for you, right? But can diagnose and prescribe. What does he prescribe? Well, the explications. That's the medicine. The teachings, right? Remember, the root of our suffering is in our mind. So then the Buddha is going to teach ways to deal with our mind, what we meditate on. We're trying to enact some transformation. So those are the medicine. And then it's not just, sorry to disappoint, but, we have a 3-day course. It's not at the end of these 3 days you'll be totally free from your suffering. It reminds me. So in India, I heard this. I didn't see it, but someone told me, there's a flyer for a weekend course, guaranteed enlightenment in one weekend. I wish it were that easy. Anyway, but earnest practice over a long period of time that's the way to cure disease, right? And then the Tathagatas means the Buddhas. They're excellent beings and wish that the teachings will endure for a long time. So maybe next slide we can do. Oh, there's one other thing just on how to listen to the teachings, and I didn't make a slide about it because I think many of you know. There's also abandoning the three faults of a vessel or the pot, right? So you can think of the teachings as like nectar or coffee or well, whatever you like. Nana. Sorry, it's an inside thing. These anyway. So if you have this, delicious, nourishing drink, you need a vessel. But if your vessel is upside down, you can't get, right? So that's akin to, even if you come to the teaching, then, not paying attention. I'm very happy here. No one's like texting. It happens sometimes. Come on, right? So paying attention. Then the next fault of the vessel, if it has a hole in it, your vessel has a hole, then even you pour in the teachings or the liquid, it vanishes. So that's akin to, after having even heard the teachings and pay attention, then kind of not thinking about it again, and gradually we'll forget. So even after you've received the teachings, to try to bring it to mind again and again. I was very happy. I think some on the Zoom also, they were saying, they've already studied the whole Lamrim once. They're going through it a second time. It's good. Very good. Reminds me. Um, so there's a tradition in Tibet. There's the so-called Great Retreat. 3 years, 3 months, 3 days. You heard of this? Right. So in some Tibetan traditions, right, after you do this great retreat, you become a lama. You can call yourself a lama. Nice, right? Yeah. Okay, I got through. Namgyo's been in perfect samadhi the whole time. This is the first joke I've gotten through, and he's laughing. Okay. So centuries, or so not centuries, like a couple decades ago, maybe in the 80s, um, there's two Tibetan geshes who did this 3-year retreat, and they met His Holiness, and they're kind of a little bit, maybe a little bit proud of their accomplishment. Which of course I'm not taking anything away from it. It's great. So kudos to them. But I think His Holiness saw this, and so kind of at the end, for the end, His Holiness asked them, "How many times have you read Lamrim Chenmo?" Right? And one, I think they said, "Yeah, Yeah, I've read it 3 times. Pretty good. His Holiness starts laughing and says, I've read it 57 times. Okay. So, and this was probably, yeah, 30, 30 years ago. Okay. The one book he took out of Tibet when he came was Namjong, one book. So anyway, we have 8 more minutes for a break. Are there questions at this point? Hmm. Oh, yes. So third fault of the vessel, thank you, is even if it's up, right side up, even there's no holes, if it's dirty, then you won't want to drink either, right? So what that refers to is then having a kind of improper motivation to attend the teachings. Hmm? So if you think, oh, I'll learn these teachings and then I'll become famous or rich. Well, anyway, if you think that you have other problems, you have other delusions, but you know, or I don't know, let's say, I don't know, some rival of yours is giving teachings and you say, okay, I'm gonna show up and I'm gonna give them really difficult questions to embarrass them in front of everyone, right? So improper motivations like this, yeah, try to leave at the door, right? So yeah, thank you. No? Mm. Does what? Study must occur in the sequence. Mm. Okay. So I'm uh, well, I'm gonna assume that they mean other Tibetan traditions. Okay. So I'll do it both ways. Okay. Within the other Tibetan traditions, right? Um, so there's the Gelugpa and then Enigma, Sakya, Kagyu. So they don't call it like this, but they do have something similar, right? So the Nyingma, they have the Where's my perfect teacher, right? Kun sang lame shelung, right? In the Sakya, they have parting from the four attachments and the whole Lamdre series. In the Kagyu, there is the jewel ornament of liberation by Gampopa, right? So the Sakya and Kagyu, they actually kind of were also formulated and took inspiration from Atisha. And then this, yeah, they didn't use that same kind of terminology, but all those teachings are there in the Nyingma as well, right? So in the Nyingma, they'll also talk about like the common preliminary practices, right? Which will be, the meditation on precious human rebirth, impermanence and death, karma, refuge, right? And then, those are all there. So does study have to occur in this order? No way. No. I mean, no one's forcing you to study anything, right? Right. And um, actually, in the Tibetan monastery where I'm at, Lamrim isn't part of the explicit curriculum. Actually, this is probably worth mentioning. So even after Atisha, there's three lineages that came. There's the extensive treatise lineage, and they studied, six big Indian treatises. Two by Shantideva, one by Maitreya, one of the kind of Jataka tales, life story of Buddha, and the Tibetan Dhammapada, which we saw the first day. And then there's the Lamrim lineage. And then there is the what they call the perceptual instructions lineage, which was even kind of more brief. You saw your teacher, and you would just get a few, like they call it pith instructions, and meditate on that. Right. So you don't have to study like this, but when we see the kind of practical benefits of studying Lamrim, that's why it's very widespread. And that's why in not just in FPMT, but most Tibetan centers around the world, they're going to study Lamrim, because it's that kind of sweet spot, right? Makes it easy, but it has enough kind of richness that especially for us who are a little bit, maybe we're a bit kind of bookish, maybe we want to study, we want to learn. It's good. Is there? We have one more minute. I'm going to take it. Is there another question? Now, I will say, in recent times, okay, so this is interesting. In the past, in Tibet, actually, the monks, they say they weren't allowed to study Lamrim. We studied like 5 treatises over the 20 years of the Geshe program. And the thought was, we've all experienced this, come year 10, 11, start to get a bit tired, then you're like, you see Lamrim, they're afraid. If you saw Lamrim, which is like very kind of user friendly, right? You'd be like, what the heck am I studying? So not just studying 900 pages. Actually, we have our memorization exam. We're kind of responsible to memorize 900 pages a year. That's like, it's so hard. So then it's like, oh, you mean I can study this instead? One book? And so they're afraid. But in recent times, now there are teachings on Lamrim. Actually, Liberation on the Palm of Your Hand was given to the monks at Sedar Monastery in the like 1920s, I believe. So it has kind of changed a little bit in more recent times. Okay. So we'll leave it at that for now. We have half an hour break. We'll see you. Okay. Well, just, maybe brief dedication due to the positive energy we've created in our time today. This morning, may all sentient beings be completely free from their suffering and attain the state of enlightenment as quickly as possible. Okay. Thank you.